item until voting time. Item 6 today is a debate on the Petitions Committee report, the final bend P061253, ban greyhound racing in Wales. I call on the chair of the committee to move the motion, Jack Sargeant.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Deputy Presiding Officer. 53 weeks ago, on St David's Day of last year, a petition closed to new signatures with over 35,000 people having signed it. 18,707 of those signatures from Cymru. That petition, submitted by Hope Rescue, called for a simple action. It called for a ban on greyhound racing in Wales. And I can see the lead petitioner, Vanessa from Hope Rescue, is here watching alongside supporters today, and I welcome them to their Parliament. The Petitions Committee agreed to hold a brief inquiry focusing on the welfare of greyhounds involved in racing, and we took evidence from campaigners, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, and indeed the owner of Wales's only greyhound racing track in Wales. Presiding Officer, subsequently we published our report, The Final Bend, and it's that report which we are debating today. Our report made 5 recommendations, but the headline conclusion was that a clear majority of the committee are in favour of introducing a phased ban on greyhound racing in Wales. Presiding Officer, I'm confident that today's debate will show that a majority of this Senedd chamber will also join those calls. I must say, Presiding Officer, I was disappointed that Bally's track previously boasted on its website, and I quote, an eye-watering sharp first bend. And it was in evidence to us from Hope Rescue, where they explained that in their experience, it was here where the most injuries occurred. The Presiding Officer knows I'm a dog lover, and as a dog lover myself, the images of dogs suffering life-changing injuries whilst racing at this track has stayed with me, including those images of Sienna, who badly broke her leg at Valleys and sadly had to have it amputated. The sheer fact that in a 3-year period, the Amazing Greys programme had to step in to help over 200 racing greyhounds at Valleys is truly heartbreaking, and it shows that Sienna's story is not simply a one-off. How anyone who has witnessed dogs in such pain can then take to their website to boast about the perilous nature of their track is beyond me. Wales should be leading the way on animal welfare, and this today is an opportunity for us to do exactly that. However, we already have an indication of what the wider public in Wales think. Opinion polling conducted by Panelbase in February of this year and shared with me by campaigning organisation Grey 2K USA Worldwide suggests a clear majority in Wales would indeed support a ban. The polling findings include 57% think that the Senedd should vote to phase out greyhound racing, while only 21% are opposed. 50% would vote yes in a referendum to phase out greyhound racing in Wales, whilst only 21% would vote no. And 43% have an unfavourable view of greyhound racing, while only 21% have a favourable view. In her response to our report, the Minister has confirmed that the Welsh Government intends to consult on proposals for licensing activities involving animals this year. And that consultation will also seek views on how to improve the welfare of racing greyhounds in Wales. And crucially, it will include a question considering a phased ban, as the committee recommended. In our report, we were clear that becoming a licensed track would give additional protection to greyhounds, but it would, as a result, in a significant increase in the number of dogs racing every week. And even that would mean more races will lead to more injuries and more animals suffering. Presiding Officer, during the last year, a number of organisations have considered their position on greyhound racing. And these are organisations that have previously worked with the industry to support the animals, and they have changed their policy. They have now decided that in the 21st century, it is no longer okay that greyhounds should suffer for our entertainment. And their change of heart was crucial for me personally and many of the committee members. They no longer felt that they could mitigate and make better. They have come out in favour of a ban and are calling for Wales to take the lead in the UK. Presiding Officer, Wales does have a strong recent record on animal welfare, and the Minister has been clear in her response that she was always intending to consider licensing of greyhound racing as part of Labour's manifesto commitment. And I'm pleased that the Minister has also agreed to include the phased ban proposed by the committee as a question in that forthcoming consultation. But I know that many here in the chamber, many in the audience and many watching at home will have one very important question, Minister. How long will it take to hold that consultation? And if the evidence on the other side of that consultation suggests a ban, how long will it take to introduce that ban? Presiding Officer, banning things is something that we do not take lightly. There are processes that need to be followed, and thorough consultation with all stakeholders has to be a part of that, on both sides of the story. I understand that. Campaigners understand that too. But where there is a consensus for change, where the majority of people no longer see dog racing as an acceptable form of entertainment, there is an expectation of action. Minister, we called our report The Final Bend because we think that's where we are, that this so-called sport is on its last lap. I hope that today, Minister, you'll be able to give greater clarity about when we will cross the finish line. Diolch.
Luke Fletcher.
Diolch, Diprwy Llywydd, and from the outset I'd like to thank the Chair, fellow committee members and the clerks in particular for their work in putting this together, and I'd also like to thank those who gave evidence from both sides of the debate as well. Now, I imagine the Chamber clerks had put me down to speak on this debate today before I even indicated that I wanted to speak, so it's of no doubt no surprise that I'm on my feet now. And one of the first visits I made when I was elected to the Senedd was to Greyhound Rescue Wales, a charity I was already a member of prior to being elected. Now, whilst I had been on the fence when it came to racing prior to that visit, though admittedly I was leaning towards the side who wanted to bring it to an end, the visit itself made me think further about the topic. And since that visit almost 2 years ago, although it only feels like yesterday, I've continued to ask questions of the Minister in both committee and plenary, held multiple events alongside Jane Dodds in the Senedd to raise awareness around the welfare of greyhounds. I'll be clear, I support the petition wholeheartedly. But I also do support it in acknowledgement that this is a difficult debate for many. Nawr, fe fydd aelodau yn dadlau o blaid ac yn erbyn yr...
Now members will argue for and against what's included in the petition, but I will seek to focus on a particular point. As was noted as the committee chair, greyhound racing is not regulated here in Wales, so naturally for some this argument should begin and end with the regulation of the sport. But we only need to look over the border to see what regulation looks like. Regulation doesn't resolve the issue which is at the heart of the industry, and we can't safeguard dogs from the inherent risk of racing. Figures from the regulated sector itself show that over 2,000 greyhounds have died or been put to sleep, and that there were over nearly 18,000 injuries in greyhound racing between 2008 and 2021. The regulated sector offers £400 to pay the costs of retired dogs, but in many cases this is insufficient to pay for the real cost of re-establishing and rehoming racing greyhounds. For example, data from the Dogs Trust on veterinary costs to treat 14 injured greyhounds between November 2018 and April 2021 shows that veterinary treatment alone had varied from £690 to £4,800 for every dog. Even if we had the ability to ensure that every racing greyhound in Wales had a good life, with these figures it will be very difficult to ensure that that is the case. It's also important to note that the industry crosses 5 different niches with different regulatory provisions, and that 85% of racing greyhounds in the UK come from Ireland, so the ability to safeguard dogs from cradle to grave is very, very difficult, almost impossible. In focusing on Wales, the evidence provided by the track owner in Wales suggests that the track is no more dangerous than any other tracks, and that there are improvements in place to make it a GBGB licensed track, which would improve safety. But in doing that, the intention would be to increase the amount of racing in Wales. Even with an improvement in safety levels, it's likely that an increase in the number of races would lead to an increase in the number of dogs injured. With, as I participated in this inquiry and as I made some further research, it was impossible for me not to come to the decision other than to prioritise the well-being of the dogs. I can't support any event that puts dogs at risk of injury, and that's why I'm supporting the petition and hope that the government will take action in this area.
Dodds.
I'd like to thank so many people. I'd like to thank the Petitions Committee. I'd like to thank the organisations that I met with, including GBGB. If they are here or listening, I really think they do care about dogs. I'd like to thank you for your time, but I would particularly like to pay tribute to those animal charities. I couldn't actually do what you do. It would upset me so much that I think I'd be taking home a dozen animals every night. I'd like to thank also those racetrack volunteers as well. You do that role with such dignity when it must be so upsetting for you. This, for me, is about the sort of Wales we want. I don't want the sort of Wales where animals are produced on an industrial scale for sport. I don't want to be in a Wales where this promotes and encourages betting and gambling. I don't want to be in a Wales where animals are injured. I don't want to be in a Wales where at the end of animals' careers in racing, they go to a dog's home where they wait for people to come along to take them away. That relies on charities, and those charities are here today. They got no funding for that, apart from through the GBGB rehoming bond. And let me just tell you a little bit about this. The GBGB rehoming bond will only go to homes who do not speak out against greyhound racing. That means that there is only one place in Wales that receives the Greyhound Board of Great Britain rehoming bond. I want to just also cover a few other issues as well. Why not regulation? Well, because regulation is still about racing. Regulation is still about producing dogs at the end of that race that need to go to a dog's home and then need rehoming. And actually, regulation will still mean that dogs are raced in temperatures which last year, on August the 12th, were 32 degrees, where the RSPCA were telling dog owners not to take their dogs out for walks. And yet, in a regulated track in Harlow, in Essex, they were racing greyhounds.
Jane, would you take an intervention? Based on animal welfare there, and you're talking about animal welfare, I've spoken to quite a few councillors with regards to planning applications, and their frustration is not being able to turn a planning application down on animal welfare reasons. Would you? I'd like to ask the government if they would consider changing planning law so that animal welfare reasons might be a reason to turn down a planning application.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point, and that really hones in on animal welfare issues. And we know actually that the only racetrack in Wales is looking to expand the number of dogs that they have, despite not having planning permission yet. They've been turned down twice, and yet they are building right now. They are building not even kennels, they are building racks for 200 dogs to go into. And therefore, I do hope that the planning conditions do include animal welfare. I know I must move on, Dir Pryllwydd. The second issue is, people may be asking, is this the thin end of the wedge? If we ban greyhound racing, are we going to move on to horse racing? And I would say, no, we're not. It's a totally different entity. Dogs for greyhound racing are produced on an industrial scale. They do not have owners who care for them and look after them. And that, for me, is the difference in greyhounds. I can't let this time go by without talking about Arthur. You all know about Arthur. It's probably the last time you'll hear about Arthur. Let me tell you about Arthur's experience as far as we know about it, because we don't know an awful lot. Arthur was from a puppy farm in Ireland. How do we know that? Because he had tattoos in both of his ears. Only dogs from Ireland who are going to be raced have tattoos in both of their ears. If they're from England, they have just one ear. Let me tell you how tender and painful that is. As an adult dog, if anybody went near Arthur's ears, he would yelp with pain. It was so painful for him. We do know Arthur sustained an injury on the racetrack. He fell on his neck. He couldn't have anything around his neck. And indeed, he would yelp in pain if anybody touched his neck in any way. Arthur spent 6 years in a racetrack and was found in quite squalid conditions by the Dogs Home. He spent 2 years in a dog's home before we came along. At the time that we collected Arthur, there were 65 other greyhounds waiting for a home. Arthur stayed with us, as you know, for 3 years. The first year of his time with us was very hard. He was terrified and traumatised by many and most things. Taking him for a walk for a 5-minute route would be about an hour, because he would freeze at any sound or sight that he was anxious about. I know I have to finish, Dir Pryllwydd, but let me tell you this. I would have Arthur back tomorrow in a flash. But I don't want any more dogs produced that had Arthur's experiences. So I hope you'll support the ban today. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Jewell James.
Thank you, Deep Roy Clywedd. And I'd like to start by thanking my colleague Jack Sargeant for bringing forward this debate today, as I think it's extremely important that petitions like this do come forward into the chamber to help us really focus our minds on the issues that affect animal welfare in Wales. In the course of this petition, I have visited Hope Rescue, I have spoken with GBGB, and I have met with several other organisations, all of which represent both sides of the argument. But the issue is, as with most things, not as clear-cut as we would like it to be. Charities such as Hope Rescue and Greyhound Racing Wales have worked exceptionally hard over the years to engage with Valley Greyhound Track in order to improve the welfare standards of greyhounds racing there, and have met with little success. They have identified aspects of the track that are dangerous and can cause serious injury to greyhounds. They have repeatedly called for veterinary cover for every race and have cared for, sometimes at an enormous expense to themselves, greyhounds that have been seriously injured or have been abandoned. I therefore completely understand why they would call for an outright ban of greyhound racing in Wales. However, what concerns me is that if there was an outright ban, this doesn't automatically improve the welfare of greyhounds. In fact, there's an argument that it doesn't improve greyhound welfare at all. All those owners or breeders that commit animal abuse or have poor welfare standards for their animals will simply no longer be visible and will go underground. They will also have no qualms whatsoever with destroying their animals.
Jewell, will you take an intervention?
Oh, yes.
Just wanted to make the point in terms of the sport going underground. I was wondering if the member realises the size of the track and the size of the ground you would need to be able to race greyhounds, essentially, and if you'd be able to explain how that would be able to be hidden.
Very next paragraph, sorry, to put it close. So where am I now? So there is nothing stopping them from having illegal races, from using disused warehouses to setting up temporary tracks, whether straight courses or bends in isolated fields, which will be even worse for those animals racing, and their illegal nature will mean that their owners will never ever seek veterinary care for them. And whilst there may be some who will say that this will never happen, just by looking at the extent of illegal dog fighting in the UK tells us otherwise. Dog fighting is still prolific in this country, even though it was banned in 1835. Indeed, between 2015 and 2020, the RSPCA had more than 9,000 reports of organised fighting in the United Kingdom. And even though the maximum jail sentence is 6 years and 5 months, the people who carry out these dog fights just simply don't care. And I fear that greyhound racing in Wales has the potential to follow suit. Speaking with GBGB representatives, I've learned how track registration improves the welfare of greyhound racing, because it's compulsory for every race to have veterinary care. Owners and racers have a duty to meet welfare standards, which are monitored, and there are well-funded rehoming programs if animals are injured or can no longer race. I'm not saying that this model is perfect or that Valley Track should be GBG registered instead of being closed. I instead think that there needs to be a proper investigation into all aspects of greyhound racing in Wales by the Welsh Government, covering ownership, breeding, transportation, racing, and even aftercare. More engagement needs to happen with GBGB, and independent analysis of the implications of a phased or outright ban has to happen, especially in terms of animal welfare. My particular issue and concern here is that the Petitions Committee, of which I am a part of, have not done sufficient due diligence in order to make the recommendations that they've made in their report. As a committee that is recommending a phased ban, we haven't even visited a greyhound racetrack, registered or unregistered, and we have taken no evidence whatsoever from those countries or governments that have already banned greyhound racing, which would have given us better idea of the unintended consequences.
We take the intervention, Jewell.
Oh, yeah.
Do you understand that Wales and the United Kingdom is an outlier globally, and that even the United States, in 41 states, has banned greyhound racing? And do you not understand that by banning greyhound racing, you will eliminate immediate suffering, and you will also go a huge way to eliminating illegal trade from Northern Ireland?
Well, my concern, as mentioned earlier in the thing, is if we ban greyhound racing, the concerns that we have in terms of the welfare standards are done by those who have no care whatsoever for their animals. So if we ban greyhound racing, the concern that I have, we will see a lot of dogs put down. And that is why what I'm saying is that much more needs to be done to investigate the implications of such a ban, and why taking evidence from those countries who have banned the sport would have been crucial in making a recommendation. I acknowledge that this is an emotive subject and opinions will be guided depending on experience. Some members of the committee have had that first-hand experience, whether by adopting former race dogs or even by growing up in a greyhound racing environment, and I fully understand and respect their point of views. However, when discussing issues such as this, opinions need to be objective and independent, and I well understand that some members here might not like hearing that, but it's true. So, Deep-Royd Clowd, whatever happens here today and whatever the result, I hope that members and the government will understand that from an animal welfare point of view, considerably much more work needs to be done. Thank you.
Buffy Williams.
Diolch, Deep-Royd Clowd, and diolch to the petitioner for bringing this matter to our attention. As a member of the Petitions Committee, I've had the opportunity to take evidence from a number of stakeholders. I'd like to thank them all, as well as the clerks and my colleagues on the committee, for ensuring the final bend report includes a balance of voices from those in favour and those who oppose greyhound racing in Wales. With a strong belief that animal welfare must come first, I fully endorse all 5 recommendations of the report. I'm in no doubt that there are responsible, caring and proud owners who do their utmost to ensure the welfare of their dogs. But in a racing environment, there are no guarantees, and unfortunately, there is clear evidence of dog owners who couldn't care less for the welfare of their dogs. Bally's track, an unlicensed track, has no requirements to ensure a standard of animal welfare. The Greyhound Board of Great Britain have plans for a licence from 2024. But the fact is, even at GBGB tracks that are licensed tracks with vets, there is still a need for freezers suitable for the storage of greyhound carcasses. Because between 2017 and 2020, 3,153 greyhounds have died, and 18,345 greyhounds recorded injuries. We also know that greyhounds are being euthanized on economical grounds and in cases where they are not rehomable. Regardless of the number of races that take place without injury or fatality, how many injuries and deaths must we reach before the welfare outweighs the entertainment? Before life outweighs death? The Animal Welfare Plan for Wales makes reference to licences being a requirement for animal exhibits and establishments, potentially including greyhound racing. With the knowledge of the number of dogs injured, dead or abandoned, even at licensed tracks, I don't see how this is in keeping with the plan's ambition for all animals in Wales to have a good quality of life. We pride ourselves in Wales on being trailblazers, recognising where change needs to happen and placing ourselves at the forefront. The climate emergency, for example. But when it comes to greyhound racing, we're in the company of less than a dozen countries worldwide. I prefer to see us in the company of the rest of the world and animal charities such as Dogs Trust, RSPCA, Blue Cross, Hope Rescue and Greyhound Rescue Wales, who have all moved away from the tried and tested working with stadiums and the racing industry to minimise harm to an outright ban. As the report notes, there's no denying that there's a long tradition of greyhound racing in Wales, but there must come a time and a place to debate whether a tradition which started back in the 1928s is worth the injuries, the abandonment, and the fatalities of innocent dogs. I, for one, am glad that we are able to have that very debate today, and will continue to campaign for the welfare of animals in Wales. Thank you.
Delyth Jewell.
Diolch, Llywydd. Greyhound racing is cruel. It damages dogs. It causes them immense suffering, injures them sometimes irrevocably, beyond any chance of recovery. And it kills dogs, sometimes immediately, sometimes years later. Dogs who have become beloved family pets, who live shorter lives than they should have because of the trauma and fractures and chronic pain that dog their days. And as Hope Rescue, the RSPCA, the League Against Cruel Sports and others have reminded us, this debate today in our Senedd offers us a chance to start to change that, to give momentum to the idea that greyhound racing should be banned here in Wales, that no more dogs should have to suffer in this way. It isn't just death that awaits these dogs. From when they're born, profit dictates their fate. They're not socialised properly. They are kept in cramped kennels. Puppies are tattooed when they're reared. Estrus suppressants are used to allow them to race. They're carted around in vehicles that aren't suitable, and they often suffer dental disease. Probably most harrowingly, there are stories about the puppies who go missing between birth and racing registrations. They are referred to in the industry as wastage, a brutal word and a barbaric practice, because these puppies are considered as surplus.
Delyth, will you take an intervention?
Yes, certainly.
I'd like to thank Delyth for her contribution, but I'd just like to remind people of the Chamber about making generalised statements about people who keep greyhounds. Not every greyhound owner is a poor owner. Some people really do care about their dogs, and I think making generalised statements don't really help this debate at all.
Thank you for that contribution. I'd echo the point that Buffy had made earlier, that there are many, many greyhound owners who really, really care for their dogs. I'm not trying to in any way insinuate that this covers all greyhound owners. I thank you for that contribution, but I'm sure that you would agree with me that any dogs who have to go through these horrific injuries, that is too many, and that's why we need to have a real fundamental change, and that's why I at least think that there should be a ban. I thank you for that intervention. So if we come back to this idea of puppies who are considered as surplus, either because of overbreeding or underperforming in training, they are often killed. They disappear, and they're called wastage, like they're scraps of meat or faulty parts, rubbish that's going to be just thrown away. Now, sport should be about entertainment. It should be about talent and celebration and energy and excitement. How anybody can look at pictures of dogs' carcasses and think that that's what sport is about is just beyond me. We need to cut out this cruelty. We need to cut the chase, and we need to ban greyhound racing in Wales. Now, I'll say a word, if I may, Delyth, about the Valley Greyhound Stadium near Ystrad Mynach. They have submitted, as we've already heard, 2 planning applications to develop their site. The first was refused in November. The second was refused last month. Now, planning decisions can't be based on questions of cruelty, of course. They were refused, as I understand it, because of a lack of a flood consequences assessment and problems with the transport statement. That is, the site would be bad news for the community under these plans for other reasons, quite apart from questions of brutality. I understand that the flood risk was played down, perhaps even denied in the first application that went in. That information, if it had gone in, would of course have been incorrect. And I myself have spoken to residents near that area who were flooded in 2020. But there's a concern that the track owner has gone ahead with developing the site, apparently working on kennels, a judge's box, extending the bookmaker's space. There are also questions around why so many kennels are planned for, 200, if the intention is only to house the greyhounds on race nights, when no more than 60 or 70 greyhounds would be racing on any given night. What exactly are the owners planning for? Wales, as we've heard, is an outlier in this, Delyth. We are one of only 10 countries where greyhound racing is allowed to continue. I think we need to get rid of this anomaly that hangs around our necks. Let's bring an end to this practice of putting profit above the welfare of these graceful, gentle creatures. And I take again the points that have been made in intervention with me and by Jewell in his contribution. Of course, there will be so many people who love and care for their greyhounds, but any dogs that, because of this practice, are actually born to suffer, I think that is just it's a disgrace. And because of that, I really would urge members to give a signal with this motion and to begin a process that we all, well, many of us, I hope, will want to see an end to greyhound racing in Wales.
Finch-Saunders.
Lowered. And again, I'd like to thank all members and the chairman, Jack Sargeant, for their work and all those who've contributed to this report. And that's what we're here today to discuss. I know that committee report findings aren't always unanimous, and that greyhound racing itself is a topic that arouses strong views and very passionate opinions. As a member of the Senedd, it's fair to say I too have an overriding passion for animal welfare. And as a former Petitions Committee Chair, I'm no stranger to measures and legislation that have come about as a result of the Petitions Committee. New laws made it here in Wales, but I'd also like to make it clear that today is, as Delyth has mentioned, the start of a process, I would imagine, because today we're about voting that we support or note the findings of the report. That's what we're here today. We're not here today to vote to ban greyhound racing or to support greyhound racing. I don't want to be seen to disappoint those campaigners who fought so hard to get us where we are today. Now, the committee has taken evidence from a wide number of animal welfare organisations. Since April 2018, Oak Rescue and their rescue partners have taken in almost 200 surplus greyhounds from the one track in Wales, 40 of which sustained injury, while the track in Wales chooses not to disclose injury and death data to the public. 22,767 injuries were documented, including 1,026 track fatalities at UK licensed facilities from 2017 to 21. And isn't it awful when we're talking about a living sentient animal, when we talk about wastage? And there is levels of wastage from the industry. In the licensed racing industry, by the age of just 3.5 years old, 50% of greyhounds registered to race have left. 90% of greyhounds are no longer racing by 5 years of age, and around 6,000 greyhounds leave the licensed industry each year, many of which then need to find new homes. This leaves charities and animal rescue organisations to pick up the pieces. Yes, of course.
Would you agree then that in regard to the statistics that you've just shared, and which is common knowledge to everybody in this chamber, the longer we wait for a ban, the more animals that will be harmed?
Absolutely. In fact, Wales is one of only 10 countries in the world where commercial greyhound racing still takes place legally. The so-called sport is banned in more US states, 42, and legislation of racing in countries such as South Africa, Jamaica and the Philippines has been stopped. Now, I think the imminent concerns are for this, are the independent track that now wants to become a certified greyhound Boards of Great Britain licensed track. And of course, it's been pointed out the number of races will increase to 4 times weekly, and more dogs, more potential, and it's quite horrible really to hear that they're already building numbers of kennels that, well, it just worries me. Now, I have got concerns about recommendation 3, Chair. This concerns the transportation of dogs. I think it's really important that we actually, make a distinction between the plight of dogs travelling through Wales to races and the many legitimate purposes for which dogs can be transported. The one part that weakens this report, in my opinion, is recommendation 5, which opens the door to examining other animal-related sports. This could impact gymkhanas, dog shows, show jumping, and any other activities involving animals. And I'm sure some of us, I used to compete in gymkhanas. Yeah.
Very much. Just the point that you're making, there's no suggestion in this report whatsoever that this will go wider or open the door. This has actually focused quite rightly on the petition, which is about phased ban being introduced for greyhound racing in Wales. And just while we're on it, we've got to be balanced. And we've heard, that people, there are people who are good owners and people who are awful owners. But you'll all know the song, "Another one bites the dust and another one and another one." And that is relevant here. So it doesn't matter how good an owner you are. The fact is simply that greyhounds are dying on racetracks in the name of entertainment.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with my colleague Joyce Watson, but I have to bring us back to some reality. And today we're here. We are here today. It's to note the report, Deputy Clywyd. A poll has found that 57% of people in Wales feel that the Welsh Parliament should vote to phase out greyhound racing, and we've only got 21% are opposed. So that's a pretty good measure. Personally, I would support a phased ban today, here. But as I've said, we haven't got that option. So the time will come, I hope, Deputy Clywyd, where we can actually bring to this chamber a debate, a full debate of all the members here, whether a ban should be the basis for Welsh legislation. I actually look forward to that debate. However, in the meantime, I would like to thank all the petitioners everyone involved with this report, and I will certainly be voting in favour of noting this report. Diolch.
Sarah Murphy.
I am pleased to see this petition is being debated in the Senedd today. And I also just want to say thank you to all of you that are in the gallery who have done so much work on this, tremendous work. Since its inception earlier last year, I've supported this petition and the work of Blue Cross Dogs Trust, which I visited in my constituency of Bridgend, Greyhound Rescue Wales, Hope Rescue in Ogmore, and the RSPCA have done in raising awareness of the current conditions many greyhounds currently endure. I also just really want to thank as well Jane and Luke. You've been tremendous in keeping us on track with this and pushing this forward. I also want to thank the 44 constituents of mine who wrote to me to raise awareness of this campaign and those who have also signed this petition. So that's really what I wanted to say today, keeping it short and sweet. I have been overwhelmed by the amount of constituents who have got in touch with me, who are really, really backing this, and I think that's really important to note. I was shocked to be informed by my constituents that as many as 6,000 greyhounds are abandoned by the industry every year and are forced to find new homes. And whilst Hope Rescue's amazing Greys project helped over 200 racing greyhounds across the UK, heartbreakingly 40 of these dogs endured serious career-ending injuries. And finally, I just want to touch on how much of a unique opportunity that Wales has actually to end this practice. Because in Wales, we do just have just one greyhound racetrack, the Valley Greyhound Stadium. Nowhere else in Wales is this practice taking place. Unlike the rest of the UK, we've got 29 stadiums. So today is actually our chance to take a step forward and lead the way for the rest of the UK. I support the report today, I support the petition. If it needs to be a consultation to take into consideration other things, then fine. But I really hope that we're finally, and we will soon be there, on the journey towards a full ban of greyhound racing in Wales. Diolch.
Hefin David.
Diolch, Deputy Llywydd. I'm not going to be taking a position today other than that of the government, and the government's position is to proceed with a consultation, which I think is the right approach. I think there's a lot of strong feelings we've heard today on this issue, and I think that a consultation is the right way forward. And the place that I'm speaking from is only from those, from the position of constituents who live in my constituency, who live in Ystrad and will be affected by what happens to the track. So all I really want to do is ask the Senedd to consider, and the government to consider, the impacts of any decision on those constituents. I wrote to the planning committee when the planning application came in with my concerns about the application. That was registered as part of the planning process, and particularly the fact that the only racetrack in Wales is built on a floodplain. And the activity that, and Delyth has already mentioned that, I think there are some wider consequences of the ban that will directly affect that, or any regulation that will directly affect that. The activity that's taking place on the track at the moment includes informal mediation of the river in order to, in their own interests, prevent egress of water onto the track. So there is some form of flood prevention happening there. I've been to visit the track. I've met with Hope Rescue and I've met with the Dogs Trust and have had these conversations. I think it's really important that any member voting on this in any point in the future visits that track and has a look at what's going on there. And I'm concerned that the closure of the track would lead to potential flood risk in that area, and also what it would leave behind would be derelict land. And derelict land is something that you do not want near a floodplain, and you do not want in that community. And that's my concern, not directly to do with racing.
Hefin, will you take an intervention?
Yes.
I'd like to thank Hefin David for making the point about any closure of the track and impact on residents. So would he agree with me that probably instead of going for the nuclear option of banning dog racing in Wales, that we should look at regulation first, because that is a way to also safeguard the people in that area as well as the dogs that race on that track?
I'd like to thank James Evans for that intervention. I think he's making his view known, and I think it's a point that will be heard by the Senedd. In this debate today, I'm not going to take a position, but it is worth hearing from all sides, including those from Jane Dodds and those from Joel James as well. So we've had those views expressed, and I think that James's views will be heard as well. But I'm awaiting the consultation. But what I am pointing out today are the consequences for my constituents. So the application, the planning application that went in was rejected because the council's decision was, in the absence of a flood consequences assessment, it cannot be demonstrated that the consequences of less vulnerable development within Zone 2 can be acceptably managed over the lifetime of this development. Now, what that highlights is that there is a very real risk of flood in there. But it also bears out my argument that it is in the interest of the current owners to prevent flooding as far as possible. If they weren't there, there would be no one to prevent flooding. So my argument today, my call today is for the Welsh Government to proceed with the consultation. And it is also for the government to consider what remedial action they would take should the consultation require either further regulation or a ban. Now, further regulation effectively means that GBGB would be the regulator. Unless they can get that planning application through, Valleys Racing will not be able to continue as an operation should you introduce greater regulation. And that application is only going to go through if that flooding issue is addressed. So that is a material concern to the decision that is made. Effectively, I think if you regulate, you're going to be 90% likely to be effectively banning greyhound racing in Wales anyway. What I would ask the government to do in those circumstances is be prepared to remediate that land, to put money towards the full remediation through Natural Resources Wales of that land in order to prevent it from becoming derelict. And I would also ask the Welsh Government to look at what consequences will there be for the future of that land and the residents of Ystrad Mynach who will be directly affected. So the consultation is important. There's clearly public appetite for it. And I think that will play out as it should. I think the views today have been expressed from all sides, will be heard. But at this point in time, I want to keep my argument purely for the people of Ystrad Mynach and the consequences that they may see.
I now call on the Minister for Rural Affairs in North Wales, Lesley Griffiths.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very grateful to the Petitions Committee for bringing forward this debate. Although there is only one greyhound track in Wales, today's debate and the petition has highlighted the very strong public feelings surrounding the welfare and treatment of racing greyhounds. My ambition is for all animals in Wales to have a good quality of life. People who own animals have responsibilities under the Animal Welfare Act, and we have a duty to support its enforcement. Before addressing the issues around the petition, I'd just like to set out some of the work Welsh Government is doing to ensure we have some of the highest animal health and welfare standards in the world. At the beginning of this term of government, I set out our five-year animal welfare plan. It sets out our programme for government commitments and complements our animal health and welfare framework. Together, they set the direction and drive a broad range of animal welfare improvements that I want to see. Work on animal welfare enforcement has progressed with a call for evidence underway to establish if existing regulation remains sufficient. Welsh Government funded a local authority enforcement project with 11 new officers taking up post and over 40 having received training over the past 3 years. Our consultation on CCTV in slaughterhouses closed in February, with a summary of responses to be published shortly. We've been working with other administrations to examine the use of enriched cages for laying hens, farrowing crates for pigs and breeding cages for game birds. We continue to work with the UK and Scottish governments, stakeholders and animal welfare organisations on proposals to improve welfare during transport. The Animal Welfare Kept Animals Bill makes provisions to deliver important reforms. Unfortunately, this is currently stalled, and I have been urging the UK Government on its progression. We've updated statutory guidance for the dog breeding regulations, and the introduction of new regulations on pet sales have made it an offence to sell a puppy or kitten not bred at the premises at which it is sold. So all of these actions, I think, reinforce the message the welfare of animals is an absolute priority here in Wales. On ensuring a good quality of life for animals, members have questioned if this is currently the case for racing greyhounds. Recent reports and feedback on the current arrangements show there is clearly room for improvement or for wider change. In 2019, we secured funding under the Partnership Delivery Programme to enable Caerphilly Council to carry out non-statutory welfare inspections at the Valley Greyhound Stadium. Animal health officers carried out 8 inspections at race events between February 2020 and August 2022. On 3 occasions, the officers were accompanied by a vet. Whilst no serious welfare issues were reported at these inspections, the track does not operate to Greyhound Board of Great Britain standards, declared by the industry representatives that I have met to be best practice. I want these inspections to continue, and I am making provisions for them to do so. They provide a critical safeguard for the greyhounds and an insight into the conditions during race meetings, noting how this is only a snapshot of the dogs' lives and well-being. Comparisons have been made to the horse racing industry. Horse racing in Britain is amongst the world's best regulated animal activities. The British Horse Racing Authority, together with the RSPCA and World Horse Welfare, is a signatory of the National Equine Welfare Protocol. There is at least one BHA veterinary officer on duty at every race meeting who oversees horse welfare and ensures the standards laid down by BHA are maintained. There are many factors to assess whilst we look to improve the welfare of racing greyhounds, and I am committed to exploring all opportunities on how to achieve this. As the Chair of the Petitions Committee mentioned in his opening remarks, I have committed to consult on proposals which will include seeking views on licensing and prohibiting greyhound racing in Wales. We will explore all options and we will take into account the views of the public and all stakeholders. Whilst discussions around an outright ban are necessary and of course will attract headlines, it is imperative we approach the topic in a reasoned and appropriate way. Our consultation must be based on the best evidence and will require assistance from those in the industry, as well, of course, as our animal health welfare organisations. This is vital so the public receives an informed view on both the current position and how positive change could be brought in to improve welfare and create a better life for racing greyhounds at all stages of their life, not just during race meets. I want to do this as soon as possible and work on a stronger evidence base. We'll commence this year with a view to publishing a consultation towards the end of 2023. My comments to the Petitions Committee left all options on the table, including licensing and a phased ban. And this government will take a view on the future of greyhound racing only after considering the responses to the consultation. Diolch.
Jack Sargeant.
I call on Jack Sargeant to reply to the debate.
Presiding Officer, can I thank the Minister for her positive engagement with the committee, not only today but throughout the process. The Minister is absolutely right. Animal welfare is an absolute priority, and that's a position the committee undertook in its inquiry work. I was pleased, actually, to hear the Minister reference the difference between greyhound racing and the horse racing authorities in Wales. I think that is an important lesson to be learned. But can I thank all contributors to today's debate? We heard it is an emotive topic. We know it's an emotive topic. Jane Dodds articulately very well all the time in this chamber in memory of her beloved Arthur. Jane doesn't want to see another Arthur go through similar experiences. I don't want to see any dog go through those experiences. But there was a mixture of thoughts. A number of colleagues did support a phased ban approach. A number of colleagues didn't. A number of colleagues wanted to wait. Hefin David, for example, didn't want to take a view until the public consultation has been completed. But he very rightly, I think, as member of the Senedd for Caerphilly, raised those consequences and concerns of what may happen next for his constituents, and he was right to do that. And of course, those questions need to be answered. I think what we did here today was the importance of that consultation. And just to turn to 2 points, I think, from my colleagues to the left of me. James Evans first referred to the nuclear option of banning. Well, because of you referenced the consequences of the economy and so on. Well, actually, the Petitions Committee took into consideration those consequences. And what we decided is it's not the nuclear option of a ban tomorrow, that if there was an evidence for a ban, then it should be a phased-out approach, so those consequences are mitigated as well. And then to turn to my colleague Joel James, I think what he was trying to emphasise was the importance of that consultation. And all members of the committee signed up to a public consultation. The Welsh Government accepted that recommendation, and we look forward to hearing the outcome of that. But I would say, in reflection of the contribution, I do think actually the committee did have sound evidence from both sides of the story. We held 2 oral evidence sessions in our committee. We heard from the chair of Premier Greyhound Racing. We heard from the owner of the Valleys racetrack in Wales. We heard from the chair and an independent member of the board of GB. And on the other side, we heard from Hope Rescue, the petitioner, Greyhound Rails and Almost Home Dog Rescue. And the evidence in front of the committee at that time was enough to persuade the majority of committee members to call for a phased-out ban. But I do think it's an important reminder that there is that stage, that right process that I referenced in my speech in my opening to this debate. There will be a public consultation. The Minister referenced that as well, and it will include that important question, I think, one for members of the committee, a phased ban to greyhound racing. Deputy Cloward, I don't think I need to say too much more than that. I do think, actually, still, that the majority of members in the Senate do support a phased ban. There is some that support regulation. What is absolutely clear is that greyhound racing in Wales cannot continue as it is today. That is absolutely and fundamentally clear. I do thank those campaigners and the petitioner, because without the petitioner, we wouldn't have had this debate today. We wouldn't have had that inquiry. I look forward to the consultation. I look forward to its outcome, and I look forward to working with colleagues in my capacity as a member of the Senedd and not as chair to continue to press the Welsh Government to deliver the recommendations of the report and bring down the curtain on greyhound racing in Wales.
A question here whether
the proposal is to note the committee's report. Does any member object? Yes, there is objection. I will defer voting under this item until voting